Hello and welcome. I am so excited that you're here for today's webinar on Master Your Interviews. My name is Diana YK Chan and I'm your host. Thank you so much for your time and presence. My intention is to be of service for you today and add value. So first of all, welcome. I'm curious to know, what is your biggest interview fear or challenge? Type into the chat box. Some of you may feel anxious or nervous about interviews, or some of you may feel uncomfortable or not confident in promoting yourself, or some of you may not be sure of how to be well prepared or where to get started for an interview. As a result, this may lead to feeling overwhelmed and stressed, or you may feel that you're overly critical about yourself, or this might affect also your sleep, and which leads to feeling tired and moody, and that would eventually lead to impacting your interview performance and how you show up. So, however, I'm here to help you today. My goal is to help you become well prepared for your interviews, be confident with promoting yourself, and be polished and persuasive in your interviews. I would love to hear, what is one thing you want to work on improving? If you're here live with me, type into the chat box. What's the one thing you want to work on? This could be being more confident, being concise, being compelling, being persuasive, being enthusiastic about your interviews. What's that one thing you want to work on there? Okay, so if you're there, feel free to type in the chat box and I'll see that coming in. Now, just a few reminders before we dive in. I want to encourage you to take notes along the way. You will get a recording afterwards. However, take notes along the way to help you with the learning. I will have a period of Q&A at the end. I prefer to leave it at the end so that way I can focus on the presentation that I have prepared for you today. Okay? All right, so if you're here, please say hello, type into the chat box as well. I have my other computer here, which I can see the chat box there. Hello, okay. All right, so I see Hussein said being compelling is one thing you want to work on. Excellent, it's all about being persuasive. That is an intention you want to set, because that's something that you can really set the intention and how you're going to show up and how you can speak as well. I would love to hear from more of you. Please make this interactive as much as possible, because I'm here live with you today. All right. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get into my PowerPoint presentation that I have prepared, but feel free to type into the chat room. I will look at it as we go. I will save the questions till the end, okay? Give me one moment. Welcome to this webinar, Master Your Interviews. In today's agenda, this is what you'll learn: the common interview mistakes that lead to rejection, 10 steps to master your interviews. I'm going to walk you through the step-by-step, and these are the key areas I'm going to cover: mindset, market research, messaging, and mastering your delivery. And we're going to leave time for Q&A as well. Thank you everyone for saying hello. Thank you so much for being here. I am super excited. Now, before we dive in, allow me to introduce myself. I am a career advisor at Schulich. I recently joined as a career advisor for the technology and operations stream. And next month, I'm going to be transitioning in supporting students for sales and marketing. So I've been meeting many of you here and preparing for upcoming interviews for internships. I'm also a career coach, speaker, and trainer. I founded my business, My Markability, in 2011, where my mission is to help ambitious professionals like you to gain career clarity, confidence, and a competitive edge to land amazing opportunities. I have worked with hundreds of clients internationally to get competitive job offers at top companies such as the consulting firms in McKinsey, BCG, Deloitte, PwC, KPMG, Accenture. Top tech firms like Google, Microsoft, Facebook, LinkedIn, SAS, TELUS, and Bell. Financial services firm, like all the top banks, CPG at Nestle, AC Nielsen, and L'Oreal. Those are just some examples. I have over 10 years of experience in recruiting, training, coaching, and speaking. I was a former recruiter at Google, where I was the first and only recruiter to help them double their office size back in 2011. I was also an Ivy MBA admissions manager for both their MBA executive MBA program. And I also worked at a recruiting agency at Fish Recruit, recruiting for various sales, marketing, training, HR roles in financial services and pharmaceutical. So I have a good perspective of what employers look for and how you can really differentiate as top talent. I also worked at Accenture in consulting after my MBA and at TELUS in marketing operations training through my new grad program that I was part of. I did my undergrad and MBA at the Ivy Business School, and I was recently recognized as one of the top 15 job search experts to follow on LinkedIn. So if we're not connecting yet on LinkedIn, I encourage you to follow me or connect with me on LinkedIn. You can look me up by Diana YK Chan. So great to see everyone here saying hello. Thank you so much. Okay, so let's get right into the presentation here. What are the common interview mistakes that I have seen that lead to rejection? This is a lot from my experience in my recruiting days at Google that I've seen. So here are I call my 4 C's. Number 1 is the lack of connection. So this is all about the rapport, the chemistry of how you connect with the interviewer that you're meeting, whether they really like you, trust you, or want to work with you. Number 2 is the lack of confidence. So this could be the way you sound in terms of your voice. You may sound timid or hesitant or soft-spoken, or just your body language is not showing that you're really confident with yourself. When you think about it, employers really want to hire people who believe in their abilities and that they can help them add value. Third is the lack of clear communication. So clear communication is all about being articulate, being concise, being compelling, be able to speak in a way that's easy for people to understand what you're trying to say. Verbal communication skills is one of the most important skill sets that employers look for. It doesn't matter what kind of jobs that you're targeting, but it's one of the top things that they look for. And lastly is the lack of compelling reasons or examples. So this is really what I call the evidence of support, the proof. Be able to give good stories, good examples of the things that you've done in the past that demonstrate those behaviors or qualities or traits that they're looking for. Okay, so you want to avoid the fluff. When I was at Google, it was all about, you don't want to be fluffy, saying that, oh, I'm a great team player or communicator. You want to give them evidence, an actual story to actually be able to demonstrate or highlight those qualities of yours. Okay, so just keep in mind that these are the 4 C's. So essentially what you want to remind yourself is that in order to really make it through the next round is you want to demonstrate that you have a good connection with the interviewer, that you're confident with yourself, that you speak clearly, and that you're able to provide compelling reasons. Okay? The purpose of the interview is to present why you're the best fit. So you need to promote and pitch yourself to persuade the employer that you're the one to hire, which is why it's so important that you need to feel comfortable and confident with yourself. Okay, so let's move into the 10 steps to master your interviews. This is my step-by-step process to help you stay organized and on track when it comes to interview prep. So take notes. Step 1 is you want to develop a winning attitude and mindset. So this is all about the inner game. How do you see yourself? What is the story that you are telling yourself? What are your beliefs? So here are some tips on how to develop a winning attitude and mindset. First is you want to change your beliefs and stories. So what I mean by that is, do you see yourself as a winning candidate? What's a story that you're telling yourself? Are you telling yourself that, oh, let's see how it goes? Or like, hey, I really have a good shot at going into this interview. I once had a client many, many years ago. He was landing interviews, but he was not closing. And when we worked together, I asked him, what is the mindset of him going into the interview? And he said to me, well, I'll just go into this interview for them to see what's wrong with me. So he was going into the mindset, that belief that there's something wrong with him versus that he has something to offer. As soon as we changed the belief or story that he had about himself, after the few sessions, he got a job offer. Second is that you really want to value your work and skills. So this is about taking pride in the work. Oftentimes I hear from clients that they tell me, well, it's just a job, or I don't see how what I do is different from other people. Well, this is all about really taking a deeper look on, like, what are you proud of? How do you add value? You may have the same job as other people, but how you do it, how you approach it, could be different. So value that in terms of looking at what are you really good at. Third, be proud of what you've accomplished. Take pride in that. Celebrate those milestones. You'll definitely get questions around what are you proud of? What's your proud accomplishment? It's an indicator in terms of what you value, what you care about, what motivates you. Fourth is to believe that you have what it takes. You have to believe that you are the ideal candidate, that you really do have what it takes. It's all that mindset, the winning attitude. And lastly, it's my favorite saying. I say it all the time. It's own your greatness with confidence to shine. This is all about stepping into your own greatness, of believing that you have the skills, the expertise, the strengths to do an amazing job. Okay, so these are some of the things that you can do to help you develop that winning attitude and mindset. And I would say this is the foundation. Before you even get into coming up with your interview answers, it's all about first working on your mindset to have a strong foundation. All right. It's pretty common that most of the clients tell me that they are anxious or nervous about an interview. It's totally okay to be nervous because it shows that you care about it. However, if you are very nervous or have very strong anxiety about interviews, it's something that you need to manage and control there. So here are some tips on how to conquer that. First is to quiet your mind. Ground yourself and look inward. So this is things such as you can meditate, to be in a quiet space. When you quiet your mind, you can really feel the zen or the calmness in you, where you feel that you're in control. So practice like breathing. See, pause and breathe is my next tip here. When you're nervous in an interview, the best thing or easiest thing you can do is just take a moment to pause and breathe. I noticed recently, I've been working with some students here on mock interviews. When I ask them questions, when they get nervous, they tend to speak really, really fast, or they're speaking from their throat versus from their diaphragm. So it doesn't come across as convincing or persuasive there. So just pause and breathe. It's totally okay to have silence in an interview. Next is to visualize success. So, athletes do this, right? Before they start a game, they visualize, the whole journey of how they're winning as a candidate. This is so important, especially if you have multiple rounds of interviews that are back to back. I know some of you have the Amazon interviews, which is like 4 hours long back to back. It's so important that you see yourself finishing and not to be overly critical about yourself. Okay, you got to see yourself each round, after each round of interviews, the first one, second, third, and fourth, you got to see yourself that, hey, I reached this first milestone. Great, let's move on, versus being critical. Next is to state positive affirmations using words like I am valuable, I am markable, or I am confident that I have what it takes. The I am words are so powerful that it helps you get into that stronger state. So an exercise you can do is write out 10 positive affirmations about yourself. What makes you awesome? Put it on a Post-it note, stick it up on the wall so that you can see those things about you there. Minimize distractions and stress. So when it comes to interviews, I think it is so important to minimize any of those distractions, meaning you don't want to have a lot going on, because otherwise your mind is all over the place. So I like to, think about like cancel things on your calendar that's not necessary. You want to try to avoid traffic if you can, because when you're in traffic, you tend to get stressed and then you're going to show up all nervous there. Okay, so just minimize distraction. Even for me to prepare for this presentation today, I cleared out my calendar this morning so that I can be in a very strong state of mind so that I can present at my best to you here. Lastly, is to set your intentions. The intentions are so powerful. So I asked you, what's your intention going in an interview, or what's one thing you want to work on? For example, being confident, being assertive, that's your intention. And that's something that you can go back to as an anchor. Like when you're nervous in an interview and you need something to go back to, ask yourself, what's my intention? And get yourself to show up in that state instantly. Okay. You have the ability to control that, to make that change. Step 2 is to understand the interview process. So this is really understanding the basics, like what to expect here. These are some things that you can find out. 5 questions to ask or find out as you enter the interview process, just so that's clear. How many rounds of interviews are there? Is it just 1, 2, or 3, or 4? What type of interviews are they? Is it phone, video, in person? Who will you be meeting? This is so key. Are you meeting people who are HR or in talent acquisition, or the hiring manager or someone who's senior executive? By understanding who you're meeting, you can actually look them up on LinkedIn to get a sense of their experience, their personality, their style in terms of communication. It will actually help you better anticipate questions as well, and how you can adjust your communication to their needs. What do they care about? By researching a little bit of their background, you can get a sense of what they care about. So, for example, if they've been in very, very analytical roles or technical roles, you can probably guess that they'll ask questions that are more analytical driven or more data driven there. This is something I do with all my clients when it comes to mock interviews. I always ask them, do you know who you're meeting? And I'll go check out the profiles to help basically size them up on, okay, what's their personality? What's their style? Here's some questions that I may think they could ask to help them prepare. I'll give you an example. I recently had just a client recently, very senior level SVP of customer experience, head of operations. She was meeting the CEO of this global company. And obviously, she had to do her research. And it was so important to really understand the CEO's leadership style, communication style, just by talking to people, how does he communicate, to help her assess how she needs to adjust her communication style. Lastly, is how will the interviews be conducted? This is about, the format. Is it going to be video or in person or phone? Because that will influence the way you communicate as well. I know many of you have interviews via video, so I want to talk a little bit about things that you can do to prepare. Preparing for video interviews is a little different from in person, just because you can't see that person live. It's so important of being well prepared, especially if this is your first time. Here are some tips. First, make sure you have a quiet place with good lighting. Okay, so if you have a quiet place with good lighting, that really sets the stage. It's that first impression there. Second is you want to make sure you have good internet connection, right? The worst thing you want is that you have just, that's a drop call, right? That you lose internet connection there. Third, check your computer, your audio that works, okay? Not only checking that it works, I would actually encourage you to test it out. So for example, even before I came on live with you here today, I actually test out my recording at least 5 times to make sure I got the right kind of audio. And I really encourage you to use either a mic or headset. Do not rely on your computer's mic, because the quality is not that great at all. It sounds very echoey. Yeah, so I just said use a headset and microphone. And another tip is when you're going for interviews via video is to look at the camera, not the screen. Because when you're looking at the camera, it actually gives a feeling that you are giving eye contact there. Lastly, is to adjust your camera to eye level. So what I mean by this is that if you're using a laptop, oftentimes what I notice is that you are looking down at your camera versus looking up. It's actually better if you can actually put some books under your laptop to make your screen or tilt it so that it's actually higher or closer to eye level. So it's like you're looking up versus looking down at someone. It just looks better there. Another thing to note is that with video interviews, because there is some lag time for the person to receive information, it is more important that you speak at a good pace. You want to avoid speaking too fast because it's hard for them to hear. And for them to feel your body language, you actually need to be more expressive or enunciate better as well so that they can really hear you clearly. Okay, so these are some of the tips on video interview. I know I spent a little bit more time, and that's just because I know many of you have video interviews coming up. All right, moving on to step 3 is you want to understand the assessment criteria. This is really understanding like what are they really looking for? What's important to them? So here is a general interview assessment criteria. This is based on my experience as a recruiter, where I have recruited for like Google, many top employers, a general criteria of what they look for there to help you think about examples. First is obviously the role-related expertise and experience. This is all about having that relevant knowledge that they're looking for in terms of skills, experience. Okay, so if you can show them those, even the transferable skills, even if you don't have experience, it's showing relevancy there. That's then the first thing that they look for. So as an example, like when I was recruiting at Google for sales role, obviously the number one thing they look for is whether someone has sales experience. But to go deeper is that because they are a digital company, they want people with digital sales experience in software and that they've actually worked for top companies or with Fortune 500 clients. That's the role related experience that you want to be able to demonstrate that you have. Number 2 is the performance and potential. So this is all about articulating your accomplishments, your results, whether you are seen as a high performer. Because if you're seen as like, let's say, top 10% at school or at work, it is an indicator that you're someone with high potential. And so this is great for those, for example, who want to go into like leadership new grad programs. Oftentimes they're developing next gen leaders. So they want to know like whether you're actively involved in volunteer activities, whether you've done a lot of the type of leadership roles that indicate that you're a high performer and with high potential. Third is the leadership and communication skills. So this is all about, you as an individual, as a leader. Are you proactive? Do you take initiative? Are you solution oriented, results oriented? Are you able to clearly communicate your thoughts and ideas to management? Fourth is the cognitive ability. So this is the critical thinking skills. This is really the problem solving, decision making skills. Um, from my experience, like when I worked at Google, this criteria is one of the hardest to pass, or it's the most common reason why people get rejected. And as an example, some of these questions they can ask is about problem solving questions, like how would you go about figuring out how many people are on the internet at any given time? Or how much money is this Starbucks making a day? Is that problem solving skills of how you approach a problem, or what's your methodology? So being able to walk people through logically with structure is really important. Lastly is the cultural fit. So this is all about that personality, the character, the who you are piece, that cultural fit. When I was at Google, one of that metric, the criteria they used was googliness, the googliness factor, which is a combination of everything, of being very smart yet humble, being a great leader but also a great team player, actively involved in the community, or doing a lot of things on the go there, doing like charity or philanthropy type of work or whatever that is. It's showing that culture fit there. So here's the thing. The most important thing employers look for at the end of the day is really the fit. They call it the fit. When they say like why you got rejected is because not the right fit, and it is hard to describe, but it's really the fit. They want to ask like, can they see themselves working with you? Does your personality and experience match with the team? Will you be able to contribute and add value to the company? So bottom line, You must clearly communicate that you are a fit for both the role, the job itself, and the company culture in order to thrive and grow at that company. Step four is you got to understand the business. This is the preparation, the external research that you need to do. So, what are some things you can do to help you understand the business? These are the areas that you want to research. You want to understand the industry trends. What are some of the challenges and opportunities there? Read some white papers or just check out their website or any news in the media. You can even check out things like on just to Google online to get a sense of that, or reading white papers from like consulting sites as an example. Understanding the organization structure. So this is really understanding like the team structure. This may be harder to get, but if you're able to talk to someone who works there in that team to get some insights on how they're structured, it gives you a sense of the role and scope of each team, and it'll help you understand the role that you're going for, of how you fit and what how you contribute to the business overall. This is especially, I think, important, especially with bigger companies such as the big banks. Organization is huge, right? There's a difference between in the retail business versus the commercial business, or like in the capital markets. If you can understand about the team structure, it will help you understand also what are some of the career development opportunities for you. Understanding the culture and values, that is so important, right? This goes back to that fit. So, as an example, I know some of you are interviewing with Amazon. It is so important to know those 14 leadership principles because you want to be able to essentially connect the dots with your story and examples back to that of how you demonstrate those 14 values. You don't need to be able to talk about every single one, but you need to pick what are your top three that you really want to highlight there. Another example would be, I know, like TELUS. They have their four core values that's really important to them. Embracing change, believing in spirited teamwork. So you want to be able to talk about examples that are around those values as well, because that all ties back to the fit. Next is the products and services. If you're going for a marketing role, a product role, anything that you're dealing with customers, it is so important that you understand the products and services. Check out the competition as well. How are they different? What makes their product great? So if you can talk about this in an interview, it shows that you're prepared. I once had a client a couple years ago. He was making a change in industry from a digital agency to a top telco firm. And one of the things that I got him to do was actually go visit those stores, the retail stores like Bell, Rogers, TELUS, to go look at the products, look at the rate plans, the cell phone plans that they have. How are they compared so that he can talk about it in an interview? Because the job was actually about loyalty retention and analytics and about the pricing as well. So to be able to really understand that makes a huge difference. Next is understanding some strategic priorities of the business and team, right? When you understand what are the strategic goals and priorities, it will help you also understand how your role fits into the bigger picture as well. It also helps you understand, like, okay, what are some of the projects that you may get to work on or the problems that you get to solve as well. Find out of some of the challenges and opportunities, right? What are some of the pain points? What are the opportunities? Because when you understand that, it helps you, again, better tailor your responses, and it shows that you're well prepared. So, what are some of the methods of research of how you can go about doing this external research? Here are some ways to gather intel. First, talk to recruiters, people who come recruit on campus at info sessions. Talk to them. Have informational interviews. Set up like a coffee chat, whether it's in person or over the phone. Find out what it's like to work at the company, their day-to-day responsibilities, what's their scope, what are some interesting things that they work on to gather insights. I always like to say that, the job that you're going for, try to understand what are the primary responsibilities in terms of what do you spend majority of your time doing. Because if you understand whether you spend majority of time, let's say, in front of a computer, let's say in your analytics type of role, versus in sales as majority in dealing with people, it gives you an indicator of the type of questions that you're going to get or the type of competencies that they're trying to probe. An example would be I had a client who, in a business analyst, like an analytics type role, She really loves analytics, and she actually wants 80% of her time to doing analytics, data type of work in front of a computer. And only 20% of the time working with people. However, in her role that she was in, it was the opposite. She only spent about 20% of the time doing analytics work, and the other 80% is more facilitation, meetings, project management. And she did not like it. So just by doing that kind of interview will help you also understand whether it fits with your preferences and your strengths and interests. Third is to review the company's website and social media, right? Really get a sense of what they stand for, what are things that they're promoting. Use LinkedIn. This is a great tool to do some research of looking at who are the people that work there? What is their background? How do they get in? Those are some things to gather the intel there. You can visit sites like salary.com or glassdoor.com to get some insights on what it's like working there, or some of the common interview questions that you may get. Use it with a grain of salt, because I think it's just a perspective there, but it would just give you some indicator on things that you can do to better prepare yourself at the end of the day. All right, step 5 is you want to understand the hiring need. So this is all about understanding what's important to the employer or to the hiring manager, right? If you do that, it will definitely help you better tailor your responses. So how do you go about evaluating or assessing the hiring need? This is a very important step. I think most people don't do this. And I think that if you do it, it really gives you up a notch to differentiate. So here's the things that you can find out. First is understand, why is the role open? Is it a new role, or is it a replacement? Or is it because they are growing, so therefore they're hiring a group of students or new grads every year? Understand the why. Scope. What is the mandate of the role, right? What's the overall objective of this job? Third is about achievements. What must the ideal person be able to do and deliver? So this is really about the key success factors. What does it take to succeed? Metrics. What are the critical success factors? This is more the numbers, right? You think of the metrics in terms of the KPIs. What are the important metrics that they look at? For example, if it's in marketing, obviously it's about sales, profit, customer acquisition, customer retention. These are things that you wanted to highlight if you have relevant experience in that. And lastly, it's qualifications. What knowledge, skills, and experience are required to be able to do a great job? Okay, so these are things that you can want to understand. This is beyond just looking at the job posting. You can read the job posting. However, if you're able to talk to someone, it will really give you additional insights. Step 6 is to anticipate interview questions, right? Now that you understand the hiring need, know who you're meeting, you can pretty much guess the interview questions that you could get in an interview. There's a common one, and there are some specific ones that are specific to the job itself. So what's important is that you want to anticipate questions by understanding the job's specific competencies required to succeed. So what I mean by that, as an example, if you're going for a product manager role, right? A big part of the product manager role is be able to take ownership of the product that you own from end to end. So having good project management skills is important. Having the organization skills to be able to create a roadmap is really important. So that will help you already anticipate the type of questions that you could get. So here are some common examples to prepare for. This was actually gathered through a study through LinkedIn, where they identify, in order to demonstrate that you're a high potential candidate, these are some of the areas that employers really look for. There was a study done that was published last year, and this is what the areas I want to share with you. The first is adaptability. So this is all about change management. You probably heard of the buzzword agile, flexibility, versatility. We're living in a changing world. Things are changing all the time, especially in fast-paced industries like technology. Even the banks, they talk about the agile methodology there. So be able to think of examples around that is so key. Second is the culture ad. So this goes back to fit, values, beliefs, interests, motivation, personality. This is all about the who you are piece. Okay. Oftentimes people think, oh, I just need to talk about my experience. You actually need to talk about yourself as well in terms of what's important to you. What do you stand for? What are you passionate about? Because that's all ties into the culture fit. Third, collaboration. Most of the jobs you're going to have to work with people. So this is like teamwork, communication, relationships, conflict management. How do you deal with that? Guarantee you're going to get some sort of question around problem solving, conflict management with people there. Next is leadership. This is demonstrating that you're proactive, that you can persuade, influence, decision making, and problem solving. Next is the growth potential. Really showcasing that you are driven, you're ambitious, talking about your accomplishments and results and your performance. Lastly, it's prioritization, right? But time management, planning, organization, and delegation, right? So if you look at all 6 of these, this is applicable to any job that you apply for. There could be a few more depending on the role. So, for example, like innovation could be one, which could tie into easily in terms of like adaptability as well. So, hope this gives you some ideas of examples to think about there. So, what are some of the common motivational questions? Here are just some examples. There are tons of them, but I just want to share with you the common ones that that I see that I also like to ask as a recruiter. The first is, what's important to you? What are the top 3 things you're looking for? This is all about understanding your motivators. What really drives you. Are you really looking for like career development, or that you're looking to have like a good mentor, a great boss, or, having challenging opportunities, whatever that is. Like really identify what your top 3 things are. Why are you looking for a change, right? If you are looking to change industry, say, for example, you want to go from being a product manager to, let's say, consulting, like, why do you want that change? It's so important to really be able to clearly articulate that. You don't want to just say just because I could make a lot of good money, or because, you need something more deeper than that to get clear on the why. Why did you join or leave XYZ company? So when I was at Google, one of the things we always ask is like reason for leaving and reason for joining, because this helps us to understand the decision-making process of why one wanted to leave or join a company, to understand what they're really looking for, like what do they really care about. Why are you interested in this company, right? You want to really go beyond like just saying like, hey, it's a great place to work, great culture. You want to really explain, what does that mean to you? Right. I had a student yesterday. We were practicing a mock interview, and one of the reasons she really likes that company was they have a huge emphasis on sustainability, and that really aligned with her core values. 5, why are you interested in this role? Right? Like particularly, why this role? So when you talk about why this role, it's not about selling yourself. Okay. They're really looking for your motivation. Like, why are you interested in this particular job? So you want to give them the reasons why. Whereas the next one, why hire you, is more a pitch message. So this is more pitching yourself of why should they hire you. Oftentimes people mistake the why are you interested in this role with why hire you. And let me explain. Because why hire you is you got to like tell them, it's like, why do you like this? Whereas why hire you is why should they like you, and why should they buy you at the end of the day, right? So the message is a little different. One is like showcasing your passion, what you care about. The other is showcasing your value add. And lastly, the most popular one, like the common one, is tell me about yourself. Like that is like the intro message to set the stage of who you are, what you want, and what you have to offer. So this is like a really promo message. Okay, so here are some popular behavioral questions. These are just some examples. There are hundreds and hundreds of them, so I encourage you to practice them. I once had a client an MBA grad, she practiced over 100 questions, before we even had our mock interview, and she was well polished and prepared. And within like a few coaching sessions we had, like she got multiple offers there. So be able to just anticipate them. It's great because you can really practice a lot of variety of questions. So the first one would be, tell me about a time when you were asked to do something you've never done before. How did you react? What did you learn? So this is all about, learning about doing something new, challenging the status quo. Second, tell me about a time when you've been satisfied, energized, and productive at work. What were you doing? Third, an example of when you had to work with someone who was difficult to get along with. How did you handle interactions with that person? So this goes back to communication and collaboration. Fourth, tell me about a time when something significant didn't go according to plan. What was your role? What was the outcome? Right? So this is all about planning, about failure. How did you go overcome that? Fifth, tell me about a time when you had to juggle several projects at the same time. How did you organize your time? What was the result? So this is time management and organization. So these questions align with those initial 6 common type of questions that I shared with you earlier, like adaptability to time management there. This was actually also questions that I gather from that LinkedIn study of the top popular questions that employers like to ask. So they could ask different questions, but in terms of when you think about it, it's similar there. Guarantee you're going to get questions around challenges, which ties into like conflict, difficulties, problem solving. Guarantee you're going to get something around that. Okay, so there's questions you need to prepare what they can ask you. You also want to prepare what questions to ask the interviewers. You always want to ask questions. Even you think you don't, at the end of the interview, you want it because showcase that you care, that you're interested. And you also want to assess whether this job and opportunity is actually right for you. So here are some examples. What's the biggest opportunity for this role? What's the most challenging element about this role? Right? So this is really understanding like, hey, like what do I get to work on? What's exciting about it, right? Just showcasing your interest in this role. And this is a great way, if there's anything you want to throw in afterwards, after they answer it, to connect the dots even further of what you can offer them or how you can help them. What does success look like in this position, right? So this is about, what are your expectations? What do they need to deliver? Third, if you could describe your team in 3 words, what would they be and why? Right? So getting a sense of the culture within the team, not just the company, right? The dynamics of the team. What type of person works well with this team? Right? So getting a sense of, again, the culture fit here, the personality fit. Fifth, what opportunities or experiences have you gained working here? So try to understand, asking the interviewer, showing interest in them. What have they done? My advice is in terms of questions, usually you only get a chance to ask maybe 3 questions, max 5. My rule of thumb is, a question maybe about the interviewer to ask them about their experience, a question about the role itself, and then a question about the team or the business. Okay, so that's how you can think of the type of questions to ask. Okay, step 7. Now that we've anticipated the questions, next is you want to develop your messaging strategy and plan. So this is really where the meat comes into play in terms of, what are the messages that you want to deliver, coming up with that game plan. Now, feel free, if you're here live, start thinking of questions you want to ask, because we're gearing towards the end of the presentation. So feel free to start typing or write out your questions. So how to develop a messaging strategy. What you want to do is you want to really know your brand. Okay, your brand is like really the essence of you, right? Like who you are, what's your reputation, what is your unique value proposition here, right? You want to know your unique selling points or your unique selling proposition. You want to know your story, which is really your elevator pitch, right? Really the overall story. What do they need to know about you? And I'll go over a framework later on as well. You want to know your why, the reasons. This is all the motivations here. Why this industry? Why this company? Why this role? Why you? Have 3 compelling reasons for each here. Relevant examples. Think of relevant examples for the job related to conflict, leadership, communication, teamwork, problem solving. These are pretty standard ones. And then think about your style and tone, right? This is all about that personality. Like, do you want to come across as like very professional or very enthusiastic or very serious? What's your tone of voice as well? So here's my tip. Master your glowing introduction, aka your elevator pitch. Make it sound interesting, inspiring, and impressive. Okay. It is so important because this is that it's like that executive bio of who you are, what they need to remember about you. Step 8, apply a framework to answer questions. The reason why you want to apply frameworks is that it helps interviewers to take better notes. At the end of the day, if you think about it, interviewers are interviewing a ton of people. So you want to make sure that you can take good notes. And it's your job of how you want to communicate. And by applying a consistent framework, it helps you show more structure and logic as well. Okay, using a consistent framework and structure approach to answer questions makes it easier for interviewer to take better notes. This is so key. When I was a recruiter at Google, all of us, in terms of interviewers, from recruiters to all the interviewers, we had to type out very detailed notes after the interview. So it wasn't just writing it on a piece of paper, but the interviewers literally need to write out like almost like word from word of what the interviewee said. So if you don't speak in a way that is easy for them to take notes, the evaluation or your response would be quite weak there. So here's a framework on how to master your glowing introduction. And this is so important. I'm actually going to run some workshops on this so that you can to practice your glowing introduction to help people prepare for upcoming mixers. Here's my 6-piece framework that I like to teach. Most of the time, people tell their story in a way very chronological order and only talk about their past experience. But with my framework, I'm going to help you highlight more about you. So step 1 is to share your passion and potential. This is about who you are. Like, what do you care about? What are you passionate about? What do you enjoy learning? The potential is your strengths. What are you known for? What are you really good at? This really helps set the stage of your theme. So as an example, yesterday I was practicing with another student here and, going for a product manager role with Amazon. And we talked about how, one of the things for them, one of the core leadership principle is about customer obsession. And so we worked on her opening about delighting customers is her obsession or is her passion as her opening line. And that basically set the entire stage of her entire elevator pitch. Everything tied back to customer experience, about product, user experience. Step 2, share your past experience and proud accomplishment. So this is the credibility, right? So you want to tell it in a way, you don't have to tell everything in terms of chronological order. It's better to summarize it, that you have X years of experience in XYZ company or XYZ industry, and then you list out the core functional areas, right? For example, when you say marketing, it's like product marketing, digital marketing, marketing communication, list out those common areas, and then explain in terms of some of the work that you've done. And then share a proud accomplishment because that's a story that would differentiate you from your peers. Step 3 is to share your present situation and purpose. So once you've talked about your past, you want to bring it back to present. This is really good, especially if you're in the interview. Talk about like where are you now and what you're looking for, right? You're currently completing your undergrad or MBA and looking to make a career transition in marketing or consulting. And the purpose is about why. Like, why do you want to make that change or why do you want that? Or if you want to connect further, like why are you particularly interested in this opportunity that you're interviewing for or this company? And if you can close it with even like why do you believe you'll be a great fit for it, that's even better. So if you look at this framework, most people just talk about past experience. And then maybe talk about like they're currently completing, their undergrad or master's degree in this. So they don't really explain enough in terms of like what are they really good at? Why do they want something? If you can give that, it's really like the interesting factors. That's what's going to make you really stand out at the end of the day. Okay. Okay, so the three-step method for motivational questions. So here's my framework for that. And you probably have seen this already. Number one is you want to have a good opening line. Whenever they ask you, like, what are your top three strengths or why are you interested in this job? Identify three reasons. The reason I have three is because one is weak, two is only so-so, and three is what really hits home there. Three key reasons why you want to hire me are, okay? Or three key reasons why I'm interested in this company are. Second is you want to give the proof. So this is where you elaborate each point and what it really means. Like, what's your definition for that? Just so they explain that to the interviewer. If you have a proof, that's great. Provide evidence of support with facts and results or like a story to back it up. And then lastly is the conclusion, right? Wrap it up. You need to have a closing. Indicate that you want the job or that you're a great fit or how it's a good, how it aligns with your career aspirations. Okay. The CAR method for behavioral questions. I know some people like to teach the STAR method. I like the CAR method just because I like the power of three rule. I find it's easier to structure interview answers. So the first C is about context and challenges. This is all about setting the stage, right? Help them understand the situation you face. It's the hook. Make the interviewer wonder how you did what you did. Next is the A, which is the actions and accomplishments. So this is where you want to concisely discuss what you did in about 3 to 5 steps. Okay, show structure there. Use leading words like first, I did this, then I did this, and lastly. Okay, again, this goes back to making it easier for them to take notes. A lot of times I know people just go right into the story. It's good, but you don't want to go in too much in the irrelevant details there where they actually lose the message. You want to focus on what you actually did, the actions that you took. So think of like marketing sound bites, right? So own your accomplishments, right? Things like first to launch or created something, you define a new policy, own a project. It sounds more interesting and marketable. Third is the results, right? So this is all about the conclusion then, is outline the impact of your actions that it had on the organization. Give examples. Examples are here like improved sales, processes, margins, financials, or customer experience. You can even talk about like what you learned from this experience as well to connect the dots. Give quantifiable data when possible. Okay, so let's move on. Now that I've taught you some frameworks here, I want to show you how to frame your answers that persuades. Here are some of just the guidelines that I've set here to help you be more persuasive. First is to have a strong opening and closing. Okay, really work on that opening, closing statement. Most of the times, I would say when you're in an interview, people get nervous and they just jump right in. Just really think about what's the opening line that you want to have and what's the closing, because that will make a huge difference. Sometimes they may not remember all the meat of it, but they'll remember your opening and closing. Set the stage. This is all about giving context here, right? Because they've never been in your shoes. So you got to give them context, especially if they've never worked in your industry or in your line of business. Start with guiding words, right? Guiding words such as the problem I faced with this, or the challenge I faced was this, or you can start with guiding words by answering the question. An innovation that I did was related to this, or first, second, and last. Show structure. State the steps. What steps did you take? Make it easy for them to understand. Share stories and successes, right? You want to be specific with your story and omit any irrelevant details that does not help with qualifying yourself. Speak succinctly. So this is all about bottom lining your message. One of the challenges most people face is that they're too long-winded. They get too much in the story. So remind yourself to be succinct. Okay, step 9. This is now about crafting your answers. Now that you've understood, some tips, let's start about crafting your answers. This is really where you want to draft out, your responses. You really want to focus on what you did, not what others did. Highlight your abilities, behaviors, and skills. Okay, these are the transferable qualities that you want to convey. So how do you prove that you're a great fit? Here are some tips. Showcase that you understand the role's responsibilities and expectations, right? This all goes back to understanding the hiring need. Like, this is the research there, like whether you really understand the job. Convey that you know what it takes to be successful in the job, right? This is all about understanding, like, can you actually deliver at the end of the day? Demonstrate you have the relevant knowledge, skills, and experience. Provide strong evidence of support. So, relevant examples, right? Because past behavior is an indicator to help people predict your future performance. Connect the dots of how you're able to add value to the new role, right? The connected dots is a technique you can use at the end of the day, especially in the conclusion. When you're talking about your past experience and example, you want to connect the dots back in terms of, okay, well, what did you learn now, or what you're able to do now as a result of the experience you had, and tie it back to the role itself. Give a sense that you're smart, quick learner, and that you're great to work with, right? Employers want to work with smart people. They can get up to speed quickly, like being quick learner, and that you're great to work with, especially if you're in a very demanding role, like they want to spend time with you. Okay, how to be more succinct. I see some questions rolling in, so feel free to start typing questions as I will open up to the Q&A soon. Okay, here's some tips. Think marketing sound bites. So what I mean by that is, like, think of headline statements in like newspapers. Usually they're about 5 to 7 words only, right? Use some good adjectives to be more succinct there. Know your key points. Keep it to 3. It's a lot more powerful and more memorable that way. Avoid over-explaining and irrelevant details. So if you realize in an interview that you're going off tangent, that's when you need to just pause and get yourself back in the game and focus, like, what's my key message here? Get to the point. Bottom line your message. This is so key. Keep it short and simple, okay? Less is more. All right. Step 10, we're at the final step here, is about practice and polish. So you spent all this time preparing, right, the research and putting together your answer. It's so important to dedicate time to practice and polish. I recommend that you have at least, one mock interview with someone and get feedback. Make time for that. Don't wait till the last minute there, because the way you prepare or write your answers, or how you think through stuff, is different from how you deliver it. Prior planning and practice prevents poor performance. So this is where body language matters, right? Why it's important? That's because only 7% of what you say is based on your words. 38% is based on your tone of voice, of how you sound. 55% is the body language and facial expression, how you look. So this goes from your eye contact, your hand gestures, the way you sit, the posture, even the way you shake your hand. That all matters, right? So 93% is based on the nonverbal cues. And this is why I'm talking about this there, because it's all about the delivery. You are more likely to get hired because of your delivery. How you say what you say. How you say what you say. So how do you sound? Do you sound enthusiastic? When I was at Google, one of the common feedback I would hear during calibration meetings with hiring managers, they would say that person has all the qualifications. However, they're lacking the fire in them, which means the hunger, the passion, the enthusiasm, that they actually really want the job. Right? So that needs to come through in terms of your energy level there. Here are some effective body language tips. Show up with positive energy and enthusiasm. Smile and give eye contact. Sit up straight and lean slightly forward. Speak with a lower tone of voice, as that gives more credibility. Slow down your pace of communication, especially if you're nervous. Just slow down. It's okay to pause and have silence. It takes only 7 seconds for one to form that first impression. Okay, which is why even when you first meet someone, that Handshake, the way you introduce yourself is so important. Like, own your name, say it clearly and articulately, and give a good, firm handshake that you're excited to meet them. So here's my acronym. To ace your interview, speak with assertiveness, confidence, and enthusiasm. Own your greatness, stand out to get hired. So thank you very much for your time and presence in listening to my presentation today. I'm now going to open the floor up to Q&A questions. Feel free to type out your questions here. I will go through as many as we can. We'll have about 30 minutes in terms of questions here. So let me get back on camera to see you. All right. Thank you so much for being here. So let me look at some of the questions that are coming in. So the first question I see here is, what should the way of the car model be? Sometimes I feel I need to spend a lot of time, explain the context, a few sentences with actions, but the result is just one sentence. Okay, that's a great question. So I would say the context should only be about 10 to 20% of it. And the body, in terms of the actions, should be the core. It should be around that 60 to 70%, and the result is that 10%. So it could just be like a few lines at the end of the day. Okay. And which is why, because if you go too much in the context of the story, the interview will be like, okay, so what, so what, so what? Like, what did you do? Like, how did you overcome that? So it's really more important the actual action that you spend more time on. Okay. Good question. Type in more questions. Like, this is your opportunity to ask me anything about interviews there. Okay. If you do have an interview coming up, I encourage you to book a one-on-one time with me for a mock interview, or also schedule some time with your friends or family to do some mock interview practice as well. Okay. Another question. During behavioral questions, is it okay to pause and take time to deliver a convincing answer? Absolutely. Okay. Don't feel that once someone asks you a question, you need to jump right in. It actually shows that you're more thoughtful and more considerate when you actually take time to pause. And it's totally okay if you need to, if it's a problem solving question or a more complex question, to write it down on a piece of paper and even jot down a few key notes of how you want to answer, because that actually showcases that you are being thoughtful about it. It's actually an indicator for people to see how you actually approach problem solving as well. Okay, so feel free to ask me more questions. This is your chance. One thing I would talk about is like that we haven't talked about here is after an interview, is do you want to make sure you follow up? If you have their contact information, it's so good to send a quick thank you note to thank you for their time, thank you for the interview opportunity. And if there's anything else you want to say in terms of summarizing your qualifications, it's also a good way to do that as well. You're welcome. All right, so let me know if there's any other questions. I'm happy to stay here if there's more questions to ask. I think one of the things is that if you do have multiple interviews coming out, like sometimes people ask me if I have multiple interviews with different companies, how much do I need to tailor my responses? I would say you do need to tailor your responses. Like, you may have the general answers to like why you and all that, but if you look at each role itself, it's slightly different. So you do need to tailor the responses to their needs. Another thing you can do is that when you're talking to that particular company, mention that company's name, mention that job title, just so that it has a little bit more customization to there as well. Another question, is it okay to hold some details while answering those behavioral questions and wait for the interviewer to ask again? So I would say that it depends on what kind of details you want to hold. I think that you want to give them enough details to be able to evaluate you properly, if they need to always ask you to give me more, that is an indicator that you're not giving them enough, that they can't properly assess you there. So what could tend to happen is, what I find is that people may go too much into the story itself and not enough about what you did. So as an example, it would be, if you can think of like specific steps, how you created something, you set up the meeting, or you negotiated, like start with action verbs. That usually is a better way than going into too much details of like what he said, she said, then I went to this, that, irrelevant details there. Okay. Compared to a full-time position, what would be different to prepare for an internship interview? To be honest with you, I think it's the same. There's not really anything like different. If anything, I think even internships are very competitive. I see a lot of students preparing for internships for, let's say, Amazon, for back-to-back interviews. It's quite competitive there. If anything, I think they're probably interviewing a lot more people, so it's more competitive. I don't think there's really anything different per se, but I would say that if for internship roles, sometimes they may be looking for people with less experience. So the difference would be that you may not have as many examples to share of actual professional work experience. This is where you want to really think about extracurricular, volunteer type of work activities, how you really demonstrate like leadership there. Okay. If there's more than one interviewer, how should we keep eye contact with all of them? That's a great question. I would say, first of all, whoever's asking that question, you give them that eye contact first. And then, you just have to kind of tweak your head a little bit, right? What I would say is, like, if you're in with them in a room, the way you sit, you want to show them that you're just facing the person that's talking to you, but you want to sit in a way that you're open, to show them that you're welcoming both of them as well, and that you give a little bit of like eye contact. You just kind of tweak your head a little bit there, okay? That you're having a conversation, and give them a bit of head nodding as well. Is it all right to follow up on a face-to-face interview if you haven't heard back for a longer period of time? Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's good to follow up. I think usually my rule of thumb is, give it at least 7 to 10 business days, especially if they're doing a lot of interviews. You got to keep in mind, especially doing employers are doing like a lot of campus interviews. They're probably interviewing like 5 at least, like, schools. So there's tons of interviews they have to go through, and then they need to debrief and have all these calibration meetings. So they do need time to calibrate. But usually I would say, within like the 2 weeks, if you haven't heard anything, it's good to follow up as well, with the main point of like the contact person in recruiting there, just to have some closure, to find out what the status is there. What's the best way to approach questions related to our main weaknesses? So that's a good question. Um, so the weakness question is a common one. A lot of people will come to me like, how should I approach that there? I like to first see it as your greatest weakness could also be your greatest strength. So what I mean by that is that when you use your strength too much, it could also appear as a weakness. But the way you want to approach it in terms of that question is, you need to always explain and give context, and also showcase how you've improved. So you want to talk about what is that weakness and explain why. Um, and then showcase how you are aware. The most important thing is that showing that you're aware and that you are doing something about it at the end of the day. And obviously, you don't want to highlight a weakness that is like a main quality that they are looking for. So for example, if, as a quick example would be, if you're going for an accounting job and it requires you to be attention to detail, accuracy is important, and you talk about that you lack attention to detail, that's not a good one to talk about. And you don't want to just say like, oh, I'm a perfectionist and all that, but you really want to be honest about it. It could be the fact that, because you're a high achiever, that you have very high standards, and how sometimes you may take too much time doing a lot of over analysis. So because you're aware of that, you want to talk about how there are certain things that you need to remind yourself, like the 80-20 rule, that it doesn't have to be perfect, it just needs to get done. And give examples, how have you demonstrated that, and how it's actually improved there. Okay. It's all about, at the end of the day, showcasing being aware, and showcasing of how you dealt with it there. Okay. Next question. What would be the right mix of examples to highlight? personal and recent examples compared to professional examples in situation or behavioral questions? That's a good question. So I think first of all, especially if you are an experienced hire, meaning if you at least have a couple years experience, that you're not a brand new grad, you always want to at least use a recent professional example in your most recent job, right? At least one or two, I would say. And then from there, you can also highlight a personal examples. I would say I probably won't use as much personal examples if they're asking about job-related questions. I would use personal examples when it's more related to, say, about your character, your motivation. Those are personal examples that you could use. So I was at least, it's like a 2-to-1 ratio, like more professional first before the personal. In terms of the difference, I want to explain the difference between situational versus behavioral questions. Situational questions, usually it's more about what would you do, right? If this happened, what would you do? Or here's a problem at XYZ company, how would you approach it? So it's a bit more hypothetical. So you want to talk about your approach to the problem. However, if you do have a relevant example, you can certainly tie it back in. That's something that you've dealt with in the past to showcase that you are experienced with that there. Okay. If you really don't have a lot of experience, you definitely want to highlight anything related to extracurricular and volunteer activities because that showcase tons of leadership, communication, teamwork, and problem solving. Another question. At the start of the interview, should we end the introduction about why we want to join the organization and why do we think we're a great fit? Yeah, so I think it depends on how much time you have, right? But I like, especially if you're going for an interview, to conclude, I like to bring it back to like, hey, why are we actually here talking today? So to be able to talk about like, why are you really interested in the company is a great one. Or be able to even say like, why you believe you're a great fit. It doesn't have to be long. Just give a few pointers because they'll probably ask that question, like, what is your brand value or why should we hire you? And you can elaborate further. But if you can just bring that in a little bit, it just gonna connects the dots a little bit more and brings that connection more that, hey, like this is why we're talking today. Good list of questions. All right. Any more questions here? I'm curious to know, like, how many of you on live right now have interviews coming up in the next 2 to 3 weeks? And what are you doing to prepare for the interview? Like, what's one takeaway that you learned from today's webinar that you want to incorporate in doing more to help you master your interviews? Okay, so that question is how, on top of that, how would you finish the walk through your resume question? Okay, so walk me through your resume is a little different from tell me about yourself. I mean, they go hand in hand. Um, walk me through your resume. I would say, do you want to give more chronological order, right? So, you can start because if you're in school, you want to say like, I'm currently completing my program in this. Let them know, like give insights. At the end of the day, I like to think of there's the facts versus the interesting things you want to talk about, right? So you don't want to just repeat all the case facts I can see in the resume, but you want to give them some interesting things that they don't know about. So, talk about highlight, obviously your education. What is your area of specialization? What are you really learning right now? Just to give a little bit insights of what you care about, right? In terms of your passion. Then you can go through in terms of your experience of like, where did you start? Like, back, go chronological order from the past to the present there. What I like to think about is that in each role experience that you've had, give a highlight. a highlight in terms of either proud accomplishment or what was something that you really learned or gained in terms of the skills that you develop, experience, or knowledge that you develop. So then when you summarize it, you want to showcase, hey, like throughout your experience that you've had, how is it preparing you for this next big role? Right. So highlight things around, for example, like you learn to how to be better in terms of communication or teamwork, how to really approach problems. Or if you're in a very analytical role, you want to talk about how you become really proficient in analyzing data. Okay. At the end of the day, as a recruiter or an interviewer, is I'm looking for themes. I'm looking for patterns. I'm looking for what stands out, what's interesting. What are some of the proud accomplishments I need to be aware of to showcase that you're someone who's a high performer with high potential? Great. I'm so glad to hear that some of you are going to be using the 6 Ps framework to master your glowing introduction. I actually have a workshop coming up where I'm dedicated to having you to come out and practice, where I'm going to give you personalized feedback there. It's a very powerful one. This one, I teach it to a lot of my clients, and people are often blown away by it by just once they apply the example. I actually had someone yesterday, my SVP client, she said that she used that framework and practiced it over 50 times. And the interview went so well with the CEO that she's already moving to next round. So it's a great differentiation factor there. Awesome. You're very welcome, guys. Thank you so much for the kind words and words of encouragement. This is my first webinar for Schulich students here. And I'm looking forward to meeting many of you in person in the coming months. Okay, any more questions before I wrap up here? This was a really great dialogue that we had. Great. Working on your STAR stories, but introduction framework gave you some new insights, and the 6P framework is a great tool. Great to hear. Card method's great. Thank you so much. Okay, another question is, what would be a great way to approach marketing case interviews? So that's a whole other discussion, but I think in general, in terms of case interviews, this is like, I'm not talking about consulting, but just in general, like marketing case interviews, you think about what are the common marketing problems that you need to face, that you need to solve, right? Things around customer acquisition, sales. So what's most important, I would say, when I think about case interview questions at Contacts is you need to have a framework. So think about your approach of how you would tackle the problem. So usually it's like what? And you think about business school, it's like number one, identifying the issue. Identify your goal. What are you trying to solve here? What are the assumptions that you need to make? What are the calculations that you need to make? And from there, like if you can write out those formulas of the steps you're going to take, that's going to be your approach and methodology. Right? At the end of the day, it's not about getting the right answer. It's about how you're going to tackle that problem. And obviously you're going to have to practice. You can't just wing it. You're going to have to really think about, go do some research on like, what are some of the common problems you're going to get and practice it with someone there. Okay, well, thank you so much. This has been so much fun. If you have interviews coming up, I really want to wish you all the best. Remember what we talked about. It all starts with your mindset. Okay, so you got to really believe in yourself that you have what it takes. You want to be confident with yourself, right? You got to really sound excited about the opportunity and show that you're well prepared. I'll tell you, interviewers can tell whether you're winging an interview or actually you're well prepared for the interview. Just the way you show up, the way you talk, the way you give examples, people can tell whether you've done your preparation or not. Now, it's also important. Here's the other thing I want to talk about quickly is that make sure that you're not overly rehearsed, meaning that you sound that you are just reciting something that you wrote. You need to speak from your heart. They need to feel that you really believe in what you have to say, that you're genuine, that you're sincere and authentic as well. So when it comes to mock interviews, I always tell my clients, like, I'm going to take away your notes. Because if you have the notes in front of you, you're going to depend on them. You're not trusting yourself. If I take away your notes, you're more likely to speak from your heart versus from your head. Another thing is that when you are in multiple rounds of interviews back to back, do not overanalyze your answers. Because if you're analyzing in that analyze mode, you're being critical yourself, you are not present with the interviewer. You're not connecting with them. Okay. So what's more important is say like, great job, next round, bring it on. Right? And just focus on that present to help you get through that interview versus thinking, oh, I could have answered differently. Okay. You can do that after the interviews where you debrief and write down what you answered and how you can improve for the next set of interviews for another employer. Okay, so I hope that is helpful. Thank you so much for watching and being present. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out and book a time with me there. So it looks like that we don't have any more questions. So I'm going to wrap up the webinar here, and I look forward to meeting many of you. Cheers to your markability. Bye now.